This is called Italian dreaming. When I was first shown the collection of buildings my father-in-law owns in Molinella, a small town in northern Italy, I began calculating how much longer he might live. Since he was only 65 at the time, and since his own mother had died at 92, things weren't looking immediately promising. Being almost 44 myself, I realized I might not come into possession of the estate until I was nearly 75. A depressing thought. But I didn't become sad or frustrated, no. I simply started to think about leaving my wife for someone else. Which, in case you're even more damaged than I am and need it explained, is much worse. But that line of thinking is incongruous with my emotional attachment to the individuals involved. I love my wife. I love her madly and deeply, with gusto and delight. Aside from some purely instinctual animalistic urges that arise now and then, I'm free from conflict in my devotion to her and my commitment to our union. I've never been able to say anything so decisive about anyone before. I also love her parents. Ivone and Umberto are the kindest, most generous, most enjoyable non-English speaking couple I've ever had the pleasure to get to know. They're among the most enjoyable creatures I've known capable of any kind of speech. One of the great pleasures of my life with Elisa is getting to know her family, as well as getting to know her home country and culture, though I have found some Italian customs to be baffling. The cultural habits that foreign travel has made me question the most, though, are those I've learned here in the good old USA. All through my youth, and even through early adulthood, I lived under the false impression imposed on, insisted upon, and shared by many Americans, that the United States of America is the best at everything, and has the best and most advanced versions of everything. In case you're one of those still adhering to the conviction, I've got news for you. It isn't true. For instance, if you think the U.S. leads the world in cleanliness or availability of abundant produce, you haven't visited an Italian grocery store. My wife Elisa has said many times upon merely eyeing an American food shop, an Italian would never buy food from those people. In Italy, those people would be out of business. That was her response to a pretty decent place. I've also seen the look on her parents' faces as they gazed into a New York delicatessen, horrified by the grime on the cracked linoleum floor. The processed, pre-packaged food products and the yellow encrusted fresh ones were almost secondary insults. But even before I'd had a chance to experience the lifestyles of my wife's Italian compatriots, or to see their reactions to our cities, I learned about their collective fascination with us. The first evening spent in the presence of Elisa's parents was on a trip we took only a few months after we'd begun dating. In spite of her Catholic background and upbringing, in spite of her parents' lifelong indoctrination to ancient small-town customs and habits, and in spite of our unmarried status, there was none of the drama that had accompanied my visits to the ancestral homes of previous girlfriends. Those earlier trips had all been surrounded by seemingly endless negotiations over who'd sleep where. Delicate, roundabout discussions had to be held about how established a relationship needed to be before her parents, or even the girlfriend herself, felt comfortable enough for us to close the door to a room and share a bed. Neither Elisa nor her parents indulged in such hypocritical postures. Her parents are working-class Catholics living in a tiny medieval town in northern Italy, but they possess a respect for their only daughter that lifted their sophistication beyond that of many cosmopolitan Americans. When I met Ivone and Umberto for the first time, Elisa's childhood room had been made up for the two of us like a kiddie porn honeymoon suite. Two single beds had been pushed together and made up as one. The wall above the head of the bed was covered with framed photos of Elisa at 14, 15, and 16 years of age. Across the room were posters of Peter Sellers and Jerry Lewis that had hung there since she'd put them up back in her teenage years. In a side note, though many might think I've ended up with a woman as beautiful as my wife because I work in film and television, the truth is, Elisa thinks Jerry Lewis, circa 1965, is the sexiest man she's ever seen. He was gorgeous, she says. Later, while making love in the room she'd slept in since she was a little girl, I told Elisa how nice it was of her parents to allow me to defile her in her childhood room. What does this word mean? Elisa asked. I do not know this word, defile. It means to make dirty, I told her. Relieved of the need to focus our energies on the avoidance of sex between adult children, there was time for talk on other topics. This talk consisted mostly of a lengthy list of questions from Elisa's father, mother, and brother, her mother's brother, his wife, and their 3 adult daughters, her parents' friends and their offspring, and just about every other Italian I came in contact with about every detail of life in the ludicrously disparate entity known as the United States of America. Only later would I learn the focus of the greatest amount of Italian inquiry into American life. In spite of differences in diet, in interest rates, in mortgage and home buying procedures, and in health care, in spite of diverging forms of government and jurisprudence, my wife's family and friends' deepest and most abiding curiosity has to do with how Americans keep their asses clean, in the literal as opposed to the figurative sense. Not that I have tremendous faith in my countrymen's hygienic fastidiousness, but I hadn't realized there was an issue or how the issue had declared itself internationally. It turns out the intrigue isn't based on actual interactions, but on their awareness of the absence of a ubiquitous Italian household appliance, the bidet. I'd always thought it was the French who most adored bidets, and to judge by my wife's family and their friends, the Italians are generally not enamored of their froggy neighbors. But it turns out the bidet is an essential item in every Italian household of any respectable repute. The question is on a lot of Italians' minds as to how Americans can consider themselves to have any respectability at all without washing their asses thoroughly after each and every bowel movement. How do you do it here, my wife asked early on in our relationship. Does everyone take a shower every time they go to the bathroom? I know they don't, but I didn't see how I could admit it. I felt myself a member of a stinking feces-ridden people. I'm not sure I can come up with an explanation. I've tried. I've offered arguments. Firstly, that our toilet paper is better than theirs. It's softer and more absorbent. Or, and this I was reluctant to say since it's so graphic and potentially disgusting, it really depends, though, doesn't it, on the specific nature of each particular bowel movement. But no matter what I say, or no matter what I think but don't say, in the final analysis, there's no question at all. No matter what the explanation or rationalization, no matter what my country's reputation for gleaming indoor plumbing and access to hot water and scented soaps, she's right. Washing is cleaner than not washing. You can talk about how Europeans don't shower as often as we do, and they don't. You can talk about their use of deodorant being more parsimonious than ours, and it is. But no matter where the line is drawn or where your particular sympathies line up, one fact is crystal clear and hard as the hardest stone. Their asses are cleaner than ours. It's as simple as that. I was talking this over with my parents, who'd removed a bidet from their new house in order to enlarge the shower recently on the phone, and I got some confirmation. Washing 5 times a day is cleaner than washing once, my father said. This is the same father who drinks a fiber-fortified cocktail each day to help with the regularity he claims to rarely enjoy. Judging from his 5 times a day comment, perhaps his aspirations for evacuations are unrealistically high. But it doesn't matter, he went on. I don't like the bidet. It tickles. No, you use your hand, instructed my wife. You don't let the water hit you. You take the water in your hand and then you wash. Silence on the line. I thought their asses might be cleaner, but their hands sure can't be. Then I decided to offer a joke. The real Italian way to do it is the most effective, I said. You clean and moisturize together by using a slice of prosciutto. Everyone laughed, but my wife's eyes grew wide and she said, that's not a bad idea. Weeks later, Eliza and I were watching an episode of a television show. The scene featured one rendition of a classic American TV joke, capitalizing on the sound of a toilet flushing. Immediately after, the husband appears and says goodnight to his wife. You see, Eliza said, that man is going to bed and he didn't wash his ass. Shame on him. Shame on us all. It's not only television characters that have disgusted my wife. Eliza related an instance that had horrified her on a business trip during which she'd been forced to share a queen-size hotel bed with a colleague. She used the bathroom before coming to bed, Eliza told me. You could tell. I don't want to be disgusting, but you know, with sounds and the smell. And she didn't take a shower. She just came out and got into bed next to me. Eliza shuddered at the memory. I don't understand how you can do that. Maybe if you're in the woods, if we were in a tent, okay, but... When forced to, my industrious wife has even learned to take things into her own hands. Prior to her confrontation with American realities, Eliza studied for a year in London. There she'd been forced to improvise in another supposedly advanced but unwashed country. We didn't have any bidets in the dormitories there either, Eliza said, so I would wash my ass in the sink. Those nasty English get what they deserve. Cultural divergences abound. Elisa and every Italian I've ever spoken with is horrified by the way American politicians seem to be required to speak about God and plead with him to bless our nation. God bless the United States of America came out of our television set, and Elisa's head snapped back as if she'd been struck. What did he say, she asked. If the Prime Minister of Italy said anything like that, he'd be laughed off the stage. You talk about God and you'd never get elected to anything. You talk about what you're going to do about taxes and then you shut up. God bless the Republic of Italy, I say.